Welcome to this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have Maura Rodgers. She is a registered dietitian, an integrative health coach, and a foodie herself. Welcome to the show, Maura.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
You are welcome to the show, Maura. You are welcome to India in this online form. And I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people across the globe will benefit from what we are going to discuss right now. We'll talk about food. We'll talk about the secrets to eating healthier without dieting. That's a good thing. So first to understand, Maura, is, our relationship with food. How should we look at our relationship with food and what has gone wrong? Because there is a lot of problems everywhere in terms of obesity, in terms of all other problems. Are we eating too much? Are we eating too less? What exactly should be our relationship with food? Help us understand that. From, you are a registered dietitian, so you would be able to help with that. You have worked with a lot of companies with regards to this: Facebook, Salesforce, Microsoft, McKinsey, and so many others. So that input will certainly help us a lot.
Yeah, and that's such a great question. It's a very complex one. I don't know if we have enough time to talk about all of the facets of that answer, but it's complicated. Right now we, are, especially in the US, we are incredibly sick. We have chronic disease that's rampant, and that's, something that so many countries are experiencing as well. And I think the issue comes from a lot of different places. I think the ease of access of very delicious, hyper palatable foods that's very calorically dense is one simple reason. But what's really important to explain is that this idea of just eating less and exercising more is incredibly flawed. And so a lot of people will often come to me saying, I've tried every diet. I'm very frustrated. I'm not seeing the results that I want, and I'm not able to sustain them. And I think that's the biggest piece here is digging under the surface and figuring out what are those barriers, and understanding that there's so many variables that influence what we eat, why we eat, and how our body metabolizes that food. So I think food is worth celebrating. I will be the first to say I love eating. I look forward to every meal that I have. I think it should be delicious and nourishing, but I do think that there's a way that we can balance the best of both worlds, where food is packed with nutrients, but it's also tasty. And I think a lot of people that I work with have a history of dieting. And so their relationship with food, to answer your question, is very poor, in that they feel like food is consuming their lives. They feel like they need to punish themselves by eating less and feeling hungry and not eating the things that they actually want. Whereas instead, I help people break free from that and really create long-term sustainable eating habits that truly serve them. And so what that means is looking at all these areas of their life. The reason a lot of us make certain food decisions isn't just about the food itself. We have to figure out why they're making those choices. And if we think of, our sleep quality and whether we're sleeping enough, that has a huge impact on our hunger hormones and how satisfied we're going to be with food or not the next day. And there's some data to show that we can sometimes eat an extra 600 calories more after a day or a night of not sleeping enough. So there's all these little pockets, I guess, that I like to explore with my clients and just people in general to figure out where are the gaps and how can we fill them in a mindful, gentle way without punishing them or having them restrict their eating.
Right, Maura. To understand it in a simple person's language, uh, you talked about that, food works differently for different people. Help us understand, how does food work for us? The same amount of food, I will have the same amount of food at my age, someone else will have, but it will work differently. So how should one look at food while consuming food and while also enjoying it? What is this overeating all about?
Yeah.
Whereas the same amount of food must be is being consumed by a lot of people at the same time of the same age group. Help us understand that part. And especially when you are very young, when you
Yeah.
are growing 12, 13, 14, 15, around that time, you need food for the body. So why is it that some people it works differently, for some people it works negatively, for some people it works positively? Help us understand with this part.
Yeah, another awesome question. So every body is very unique. We all know that, and that's very cliched, but w- when you look at different literature that have compared two different people eating the same meal, to your point, why is it that some people respond differently, or they might gain more weight and some people might maintain their weight, or some people might lose weight? Like, what is it about that unique person? Well, there's a lot of factors. One is our genetic makeup. There are people who might have an easier time processing certain foods than other people. Another thing to really explore is your gut microbiome. So we're now understanding that the microbes, the bugs that live in our gut that help us process our food, also in a very backhanded way can influence your ability to stabilize your blood sugar and have an easier or harder time digesting or absorbing your food, and therefore can affect your metabolism, which is really fascinating. I think a lot of people might think that those are entirely two different things. There's no way your gut could impact how your body metabolically responds to certain foods, but we're now seeing that that's true as well. Also, the relationship that your glucose and your insulin, so managing your blood sugars, it's a little bit complicated, but to simplify it, that is also very much the cornerstone of a healthy person, is how well your body is able to take the energy that you consume and use it effectively, specifically carbohydrates. That, I think, is difficult for a lot of people. And so when you have a lot of glucose that increases itself in your bloodstream, and the insulin is sort of like that little response to that glucose that helps bring those numbers down and find a place for that glucose to go. When that relationship is off, you are going to run into a number of issues. And so figuring out if you are somebody who is having a hard time managing your blood sugars, you might then continue to have a hard time responding to certain foods. So I think, again, it's very important to take a personalized approach to this, because oftentimes we look at other people and say, why is this working for them and it's not working for me? I must be doing something wrong. But the reality is, and what I really encourage people to think about, is it's not necessarily you failing. I think a lot of diets fail people because they're not designed to be successful. But you also have to understand that it's almost like a puzzle. You have to think about all these puzzle pieces and how they come together. And once you find that secret recipe that really works for you, you're able to process your food better. And, regardless of your age, you can always increase or boost your metabolism, give your body a chance to kind of operate at the highest level. So yeah, I think there's more I could go in as far as explaining that, but that's a more simplified approach.
Absolutely, absolutely, Maura. So let's understand this dieting part. A lot of people, whenever they have a problem of weight gain or perceptional weight gain, or whatever way people are told that they look like, the result the fastest recourse that they find is in dieting.
Mm,
Reduce the amount of food. But and many of the times, even some of the people, they tell about this, that go for dieting, reduce the food intake. How should one look at that? Is that the only answer? Because seems to be the first answer. And especially uh, people who are fond of food, for them it is almost like a curse. They don't want to not have food and just go to dieting. What is the best way? You talk about the secrets to eating healthier without dieting. So this sounds
mhm.
very good. How can one do this, and how
Yeah.
can also people make sure that they are not eating more than their body needs? What is the best way to get started with this sort of thing?
Awesome question again. And I think the way that I like to describe it is you want to make sure that a lot of the basics you're doing well to start with. So basically giving your body a chance to operate and process your food in the best way possible. So that means making sure you're getting, 7 to 8 hours of sleep every single night, trying to find ways of moving your body that feel good for you. Also getting a deeper understanding of the basics of nutrition. I think most people go their whole life without really having an opportunity to learn that. And food's interesting in that we experience it and interact with it every single day for the rest of our life, but a lot of us don't really know what happens after we swallow it and how it impacts us. So I think having just that foundation helps you feel more empowered to understand the nuances of how certain foods are packaged and the value that you get from them. Because what it really boils down to is figuring out how you can pair certain foods together in certain amounts while still listening to your body. That's a big thing that I often teach is dieting pulls you away from listening to your body because you're relying so much on these external food rules to guide your decision making. But we know statistically by 12 months, the majority of most diets fail people, and that regardless of what type of fad diet you're doing, by 12 months, you often will regain your weight and more, which is incredibly discouraging and frustrating. And when you restrict your eating to the point where you're hungry more than you're satisfied, what is actually happening is your body says, hey, I'm not getting the fuel that I need to just thrive. So therefore, I can't afford to continue burning energy at the rate I want to. So I have to slow things way down, which means your metabolism slows down. So a lot of people who start dieting often are at a disadvantage afterward because their metabolism is slower. They've burnt more muscle. They're not really burning their body fat in the way that they think they are when they're seeing that rapid weight loss. So your metabolic health is sometimes worse off after you're dieting. And then people continue dieting because they think, I have to do something, this isn't working. And so you kind of find yourself in this hamster wheel, which there's no judgment or shame there because I think the dieting industry is massive and they're constantly trying to get people to believe they're not good enough in their body. They have to do something quick and rapid. So I would just say anytime that you're seeing something that is promising a lot of results up front, that's a red flag, stay away. So instead, if you do the basics well by moving your body in ways that feel good, getting that basic understanding of nutrition knowledge, managing stress, emotional eating is something I work with a lot of people on because it's very common. We often lean into food because it tastes really good as a way to soothe certain emotions. But we can find that that can be a slippery slope as well. So that doesn't necessarily serve us. But if we can practice listening to our body and eating more mindfully and slowly, you can enjoy all food, honestly, but do it in a way where there's more intentionality around it, and you walk away feeling satisfied, not overly full. So, there are some core principles as far as what most people thrive on, and that's making sure you have some degree of protein and fiber and healthy fats and antioxidants. And that might feel overwhelming for a lot of people, but there's actually a very simple formula that can help people figure out what that looks like and how to piece that together for them. So I think when you pull these things in and do it in a slow, gradual way, that's the recipe for success.
Right, right, Maura. Now let's look at dieting and fasting. In a lot of cultures, people look at fasting. Even in Indian culture, fasting as something to give some respite to the body because of whatever reasons. And nowadays, you see a lot of all these videos I've seen come up in social media that fasting is, and it's not about dieting. It's about giving the time ample enough of time to digest the food and then look at the how should one calibrate these two things for eat right as well as fasting. Do you also suggest things about fasting? If not, or if yes, how do you look at as a dietitian in terms of people who are looking at fasting? What is your understanding of this? And what is the right way to do fasting whenever they are doing for it?
Great question. So, interestingly enough, when I was pursuing my degree as a dietitian, I had the opportunity to do a deep dive into some kind of research, and I was fascinated with fasting. I had a lot of Muslim friends, and that's something that culturally they have been doing for a very long time. And I think that's true with a lot of practices in religion and other cultures. That if we look back to thousands and thousands of years, there's some degree of fasting that has been woven throughout different cultures over different periods of time. So I think it can be a very sacred thing. I think today, there's definitely value to it. We understand that it can improve your cardiovascular disease risk. It can help preserve your cells, and so it can slow the aging process down. It can decrease inflammation. Definitely gives your gut a chance to reset, because a lot of us are eating and snacking and eating all day, and so our gut is overwhelmed. So there are a lot of valuable takeaways from fasting, but I will also say that fasting can be a very extreme way of eating as well. And so if you're constantly ignoring your internal hunger cues to the point where it's putting you at a health risk, that's something that you want to be very careful about. A lot of people I've worked with who have wanted to start fasting because they can see that it's trendy and, it's been around for a very long time. But those who might have a history of eating disorders or disordered eating, that is a time when I don't think that's appropriate for people. Of course, women who are pregnant should not be fasting. So it is important to talk to your provider about whether that could be a valuable tool in your toolkit. When we think about managing our health and doing things to improve our metabolic health, I think there is a time and a place for fasting. I think the 16-8 form of fasting is maybe more realistic for a lot of people versus the very extreme ways of fasting, which is, maybe 24 hours or 48 hours. So fasting for 16 hours, and then, of course, in that 8-hour window, feeding yourself those nourishing foods. I've also seen in the literature that when you aren't responding with food during that 8-hour fast, for example, or the time when you're feeding with high quality food, then you don't get as much of the benefit from the actual fast. So, the food you eat when you're not fasting is just as important as the fast itself in a lot of cases. So I do think that there's value to it. And I do think it should be something that's celebrated and approached again with like a lot of intention around it.
Absolutely. Well explained, Maura. Now let's come down to the another aspect of food, that is the processed food. How should we processed food are a reality of today's life, so we can't run away. And in some places, especially in the US and all, where there are very busy people all throughout, you go for packaged foods and all. So how
Mhm.
should one look at processed foods, and how should one look at the health part? How do you calibrate again these two parts of our lives, and so that we eat healthier, but also if we are eating processed food, then we make sure that it is not so much that it starts uh, risking our health part.
Yeah, and just to kind of give a little bit of background, there's two variations of processed food. So processed food is, basically it could be anything that has been manipulated to some degree that is more efficient for the user to consume, for the individual to consume. So think like canned tuna, for example, or salsa. Ultra processed food is, I think, what you're also describing is that type of food that is so delicious, that is so far from what it originally was. So let's say Doritos or a French fries or something. So something that's highly processed, that's gone through so many steps along the way, and every step, oftentimes, the nutrients have been removed. It's been highly processed, and then a lot of added chemicals and flavorings have been packed into it, so it tastes so good. And what I want people to understand about processed, ultra processed foods specifically, is that yes, it's delicious, and I do think that there can be a time and a place for it, but it's very important to understand going into that food decision that there have been brilliant scientists who have worked their entire lives to make sure that that food tastes so irresistible that you become a lifetime consumer. So when you take a bite of a Dorito, for example, I don't know a single person who can just have two, right? It's like made for you to eat the whole thing. and that's not an accident. That's very intentional. So all these chemicals and flavorings are coming together where it creates this mega explosion in your mouth, and therefore creates this dopamine response in the brain where your body says, oh my gosh, that was euphoria. That was like a firework explosion. I want more. I need more now. So you are putting your body in a position where you become more vulnerable to navigating that. So it becomes very hard to eat mindfully and eat intentionally because your chemistry is thrown off a bit and your brain just wants more of that experience. And what's also interesting to think about is there's something called the Miami phenomenon. Have you ever been to Miami in Florida?
No.
No,
But
okay. It might be far away from you, but anyone who's been to Miami or any place where it just you show up and you're like, "Wow, this is amazing." You can imagine that the first time that you land, or if you've gone to Las Vegas, it's kind of the same idea that you have that wow factor. But then by day 3, you kind of need more to get the same impact that you had on day 1. And that's the same experience that happens with food, that we oftentimes need to be eating more to get the same wow factor that we had the first time we ate that, which again drives you to want more and more. So I think it's important to recognize that those food companies are not trying to keep you happy. They're not trying to keep you healthy for sure. And that you can still enjoy them, but I want you to think about that potentially being an accessory to a meal and not a meal itself. So if you have the opportunity to ever choose whole, real, fresh, nourishing food that helps you stay alive and healthy and vibrant and energized, lean into that as much as you can, and definitely make room for foods that you enjoy and that you love, and you don't have to stress about it. But as long as there's some degree of balance, and again, being mindful about how that food's going to impact you. And I think just coupling that with other real fresh food helps to keep you in more of a grounded place.
absolutely, absolutely. Again, well explained this part also, Maura. Now to understand it from a child's perspective, children are very vulnerable. They like something and they want more of that same thing. So an
Yeah.
adult, you can tell of them about processed foods, about any other food, whether to not have or have not too much. But what about children? How do you tell them? And children are a big source of revenue for a lot of companies, even in terms of food. You are a mom yourself, so you know about this. How do you tell your children about this? Okay, this food is good, you can have it sometime, but not beyond this. How do people or parents tell their children about some foods that you can only experience sometime, but not in terms of having it in more quantity or much more frequently? Help us about how do you teach kids about healthy food, about good food, when they have tasted foods like which taste so great to them.
Yeah, another awesome question. So, yeah, as you mentioned, I'm a mom of 2 babies. I have a 2-year-old and an 8-month-old, and I love food and I want them to love food too. I want them to celebrate it and I don't want them to stress about it. But I do think it's very important to recognize that kids are prey. I hate to be so dramatic, but they're prey for a lot of these large food companies, because if you walk down the aisle of a grocery store and you see cereal and you see candies for kids, that it's bright colors and it's all their favorite cartoons and characters and people they admire and look up to. And so there becomes this very tight connection that kids form with food that's high in sugar, low in nutrients, highly processed, full of colorings and chemicals that we unfortunately in the US still allow, which is very unfortunate. So I think for parents, it's an uphill battle every time their kid leaves their house. And so what I am doing in my own home is I am talking a lot to my 2-year-old, who understands a lot, how important it is first and foremost to take care of their body and body appreciation, and understanding that their body is the most beautiful home they'll ever have, and this incredible vessel that they get to call theirs. And that it's important that we treat it with love and respect, and be intentional about how we take care of it and how we talk to our body and how we fuel our body. So first and foremost, starting there, I think helps kids recognize that they're very important and their bodies are capable of doing so many things, and that in order to accomplish the goals and perform in school and play in the sports that they love and do arts and crafts, that they want to be on their A game and they want to feel good. And I think that's something that I teach a lot of my clients who are adults, is how do you want food to make you feel? How do you want to feel when you walk away from a meal? Do you want to feel empowered and energized and light in your body, or do you feel sluggish and tired and stressed, or feeling like you made a bad decision? Like, that doesn't feel good. So just, I'm trying to use that language with my own son, and I teach a lot of my clients how they can help their kids with this as well. But having that body appreciation, using the language to figure out and just take time to evaluate what feels good for me, what food do I deserve if I have the option to choose. And I just make sure that I give my 2-year-old as much option as possible. So he's very unique, but he loves like the most bizarre foods. He eats sauerkraut and kimchi and he'll eat more salmon than I will, and he loves broccoli. And so we've just made it fun, and we eat the same things that he eats. And so we don't put any taboo on it. We don't bargain with kids like, if you do this, you'll get to eat this, because I think that also creates a slippery slope where as time goes on, they use food as a reward mechanism, and that can just become difficult as time, as they become adults, as a coping mechanism. But basically, yeah, I think having that foundation of good, nourishing food as available and accessible to them as often as possible, and then also keeping foods like chocolate and ice cream and other things that all of us love available to them as well, not making a big deal of it, not stressing about what they shouldn't do, or overwhelming them with having too much. I think giving them the option to make decisions on their own is also empowering for them to think about. So obviously kids love sugar, and they're going to probably want to choose a lot of these other candy or processed foods whenever they have the option to. But I think if you approach it with a more of a neutral lens, then I think, will continue to recognize that it's important to be intentional about how often they eat it, and making sure they're pairing it with other things as well that are more nourishing.
Absolutely, absolutely. There is much to learn about all the food and everything else. So how do people, what do people generally come to you for? Tell us a bit more about Wellness with Maura. You are the founder of that, and also about your signature program, the 3-month signature program, if I understand. Help us about that, so that people who want to connect with you can connect with you for this particular program, and what is the best way for them to connect with you to get the best out of Wellness with Maura.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that. And as you can tell, I'm very passionate about what I do. I love food so much, and my goal is really to help people improve their relationship with food, improve their relationship with body, and so they never have to diet again, and they never have to stress about what they're eating. I want things to click, so it really is the last time they ever have to worry about their health and their nutrition in this particular way. So a little background on me: I am a dietitian, as you know, and I've had the opportunity to work in a variety of roles. Most recently, I was one of Facebook's in-house dietitians in California, which I absolutely loved, but I felt it was ready for me to branch off and do my own thing. So I've been working virtually the last year. I built my business, and I work with people all over the world, and it's just the most rewarding thing. So I have created a program that is really, a decade of my expertise and my coaching bundled into 3 months, that I really just found these are the things that kept coming up for so many people. And I want to make sure I have a very efficient way for them to work through these. And so it's basically a combination of one-on-one sessions with me, with educational training. So videos that they get to watch, and workbooks, and lots of tools, recipes, snacks, and ways that we can troubleshoot any barriers, but lots of great knowledge where we talk about, again, becoming more of a mindful eater, letting go of a mindset that's not working, belief system that's not working, and figuring out how we can nourish our body, not punish it. And again, just creating these gratifying eating habits that feel good, where we can celebrate all food, but also do it in a way where it comes from within. It makes sense for you and your lifestyle and your culture, not because you're having to fit into this very rigid diet that isn't very fun to begin with. So yeah, people are happy. I guess I should say that you can reach out to me on Instagram. If you're on Instagram, my handle is Maura, Maura.wellness, or my email. You can always reach out and just chat, and we can always schedule a complimentary call if you just want to talk through things and see if it's a good fit. And so my email is m@wellnesswithmaura.com.
Wonderful. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.